Welcome to Break Free from Corporate, the only podcast dedicated to bringing you business success secrets from leading entrepreneurs with one thing in common. They left the corporate world, became their own boss, and are now living incredible lives. To access previous and all future episodes, visit breakfreefromcorporate.com and subscribe today.
Hello and welcome. This is Gavin Sequeira here, founder of breakfreefromcorporate.com. I'm glad you could join us today. Today, I'm really excited to be talking to entrepreneur Gabrielle Aitken from a couple of businesses that she runs. One's called CMO On Demand, and the other one is called Aprelo. And she's going to talk to us a little bit about each of those later on in the podcast. But she's been kind enough today to share some of her time and thoughts on this podcast. And our aim is really to share a little bit about her story, where she came from, and how she was able to kind of transition from the corporate world into her own business. And my goal for you guys is that this will inspire you to take action, get out there, start pursuing what you're passionate about. And I'm really excited about this podcast. Gab, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Gav.
You're welcome. Cool. Now, Gab, what I wanted to do is just introduce a little bit about your background for our listeners, so they kind of have a bit of a background, and then I'm sure as we get into all of this, you can elaborate a little bit more. Is that okay?
Sounds good.
Cool. So Gabrielle is someone I've known for many years. She's had an amazing career for as long as I've known her, and she's predominantly been in the marketing space within the technology industry. And Gab has worked for giant companies like IBM and NCR, and she's also worked for some more entrepreneurial and innovative companies like Distro and i2. Now, Gab has held very senior management roles and functions across pretty much all over the world, from Australia, New Zealand, all across Asia Pacific, and even at a global level. So she's really been someone who has seen the bigger picture. And it's no surprise that, with an amazing track record of high achievement and really high work ethic, she's been the recipient of many, many illustrious awards throughout her career. And what I find really amazing is that over the last 3 years, she has embarked on her own entrepreneurial journey outside of the corporate world. And this is particularly something that I want to touch upon with the startup of her own marketing consultancy with CMO On Demand, and then her inner beauty and styling business called Aprelo. She's a highly talented lady, beautiful on the inside and out, and I'm really glad to call her my friend. Gab, is there anything you'd like to add to what I've just said? Is there anything I might have missed out?
No, I think you've done a pretty good job of summarising, where I've been and where I'm at. So
awesome. Okay, cool. Well, I know that over the last 15 years, you've had a really good career. Now, we've had the pleasure of working together for a few years at IBM, and so I got to see you in action, and I saw some of the things you achieved. And I know we used to work really hard. We even partied really hard in places like Vegas, and with some of the travel that we did in Asia and things like that. Take us briefly through the journey that you've been through, and what has brought you to where you are today, because you're in a very different space right now, aren't you?
I am indeed, and that is something that could potentially take this whole podcast to talk about. But just to summarize, I guess it's been an evolving journey for me. Firstly, I didn't even start out to get into marketing. I started studying medicine.
Wow. Okay.
So started on a very different path to where I'm at now. Did a couple of years of medicine, and it was, that would have been, 20 years ago now. And even back then, I sort of was very good at, I guess, following my heart, even though I didn't articulate it at that point in time. But I just, when I was studying medicine, had this niggling feeling that this wasn't the path that I was meant to be on, and I tried to get my head to convince me that it was the path, and all the reasons why I should continue down the path of becoming a doctor.
Right.
But at the end of the day, I decided that no, it just didn't feel right for me, and I made a very big decision to change over from my medical degree into a Bachelor of Commerce and Marketing degree, which then got me on the marketing path. And And then, once again, I didn't really actively make a decision to get into technology marketing. Actually started out working for Streets Ice Cream.
Did you really?
Selling
Wow.
paddle pops with the view to move into marketing for Streets, but didn't really like selling paddle pops that much. So then an opportunity came up to join NCR, which got me on the IT marketing path. And then I guess my career continued to evolve over a number of years, just as I said, not really consciously making choices, but just following opportunities as they came up. It took me to IBM, of course, where I met you and
Yes.
And a number of other amazing people. Had the opportunity to do a number of different roles at IBM, which was really, really valuable experience. One, because of the people that I met through doing that, and two, just the business and professional experiences I had doing that as well. But
Yeah.
I guess then I got another niggling feeling in my heart that this just wasn't where I was meant to be any longer. And tried to ignore it for a little while, but it kept sort of getting louder and louder. And then eventually I felt that I had to listen, and I made the big call to exit the corporate world and start my own businesses. And as you mentioned, there's a couple of business ideas that I have, which I guess appeal to the different aspects of myself.
Yeah.
Aprelo is my inner beauty styling business, which is really, well, the word Aprelo is derived from taking the first two letters of the words appreciate, respect, love. And it's all about inspiring and empowering women in particular to appreciate, respect and love inwardly and outwardly, thereby empowering them to live a more fulfilling life. So it all comes back to, you can't be loved by another until you love yourself, and you can't fully give yourself to anything until you fully love yourself. So it's really about that. And so that sort of appeals to a large part of me, because that's a journey that I've been on myself, and it's something that I wanted to be able to share with other women.
Fantastic.
And then
Yep.
my other business, as you mentioned, CMO on Demand, that's really about my marketing side, and that's I do enjoy the challenge of solving business problems and helping businesses grow by leveraging marketing. So that's the other business that I started up since leaving IBM. And at the moment I've sort of, both have been evolving over the last few years, and there's times where CMO on Demand, is taking more of my time and energy,
Yeah.
and there's times where Aprelo is. But it's great to be able to have the two, and it's great to be able to feel like I'm doing something that really resonates, at a heart level.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic how you've brought the best of both worlds together. In terms of, like, you haven't given up one or the other. You've got a very strong appreciation for the appreciation, respect and love part, which obviously is formed Aprelo. And then, you've carried that through now, and you've given it an identity, if you like, and you're helping other people with that. And, with all of your marketing experience, you haven't quite put that aside. You're still in that space. So you're making this work on two different levels, and do you find that the two, in some way overlap, or are they just two very completely, like, do you use aspects of Aprelo in your marketing approach to business?
Of course, definitely. I think, as I said, the whole premise of Aprelo is really about learning to nurture aspects of yourself in order to be able to give more of yourself. So I actually personally practice Aprelo, so in my CMO on Demand business,
Awesome.
so that I'm always fresh and inspired and motivated for my CMO on Demand clients. And if that means taking some time out to go for a walk along the beach, or to do something that I really love doing, and just have some me time, then I really place importance on that.
Oh, definitely. By the way, if you hear my cat in the background, he's just trying to jump in on this podcast. So, so anyway, I'm just going to keep him close here. But, I guess most of our listeners are probably thinking, wow, Gab, you've had such an amazing career in the corporate world, and I know a lot of people who are listening to this are probably in the midst of their rise in the corporate ladder, and they're enjoying success, and maybe they're hearing that little voice inside them saying that there's something else that they could be doing. But it's not always easy to make that switch, and in your case, from what you shared, you've always had an entrepreneurial vein sort of running in your body. So maybe that was something that was easier for you, or do you think that you slowly developed this need to keep evolving, keep moving, keep changing? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, for me, I wouldn't so much say that I've always had an entrepreneurial streak. I was never one of those people who said, oh, I'm definitely going to have my own business. I just kind of, went with where the opportunities took me and learnt certain things about myself, and then, got to understand when that little voice inside of me was saying, this isn't quite right for you, it's time to move on to something else. So it was not something that I had always planned to do.
Okay.
And I still believe that, you can't commit hard and fast to one path for the rest of your life. Like, you do need to sort of, go with where you feel to go at a point in time, and that may take you on to somewhere completely different that you haven't even thought of right now, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. Yeah, and I think the great thing is that you actively listen to that voice inside you. So when it's like a gut instinct, or like you call it, a heart feeling, or whatever. But the thing is, it's your intuition, and the great thing is you're very much in tune with that. So you listen to it, whereas sometimes people suppress it. I think that's a really, really good thing to take on board.
Yeah, look, it's not like, as soon as that voice pops up, I act on it. Like,
no.
For me, it's been a process. It's been one, actually acknowledging that voice has some validity, and then two, gaining the courage to actually act on it.
Yeah.
It's a process. It's not something that just happens and bang, you do it overnight.
Fair enough. Now tell me, Gab, when you were in corporate, you had already built up these two businesses to some degree, but when you first started on this path, what was that like? Because let's say when you decided, okay, this is not going to be me forever, I've got to do something else. How did you go about putting something in place? Because obviously this is something you've got to do outside of your working life. You've got to do this in your spare time, over the weekends and things like that. Did you know what you had to do, or did you kind of just work your way through the whole process, just as it came?
Well, I think, as you said, this is, to get a business off the ground, if you're trying to, leave the corporate world and get something else up and running that is, sustainable, moving forward in place of your corporate role, I think, you need to be committed to put in the time outside of your corporate business hours. But if it's something that you're passionate about, you don't actually mind putting in the time and the effort, because it doesn't actually feel like work in a lot of ways. So, that was my experience anyway. I was almost excited to get home at night and actually do some work on my business, or sit down on the weekend and do some work on my business, because it was something that I was passionate about. It was something that I loved doing. And it really uplifted me, as opposed to drained and exhausted me, which was how I sort of felt sometimes with my corporate job. So I didn't find it that hard doing the two, but you do get to a point where you go, okay, in order to take my business to the next level, I really do need to give it more time than just nights and weekends. And you do need to, at some point, draw a line in the sand and take that jump. And I think once again, it's about following the heart feeling, as opposed to being influenced by the fear of what what may or may not happen if you do that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point, because when you build anything part-time or whatever you put your energy towards, it's going to grow. And if you put, a part-time amount of energy, then you'll have a part-time business. And if you put, more and more time and dedication towards that, it's just going to grow even more. So yeah, it is challenging coming up with that fine line. Where do you draw the line in the sand and go, okay, I'm going to have to dedicate more time. So maybe I reduce the number of hours or the commitments I have to my normal regular daytime job so that I can feed this other thing a bit more energy. Because there's only so much time you have on weekends and after hours.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And now when you actually decided, okay, this is the path I'm going to go down, so I'm going to dedicate time towards it, and I'm going to keep building it, and that's what you're going to do. How important was it that, from the day you decided to leave the corporate world, that you were going to be financially stable to enable you to continue down this journey? And the reason I ask you this is because I know a lot of people who have, they've had this great idea. This is what I'm going to do in my business. And, I'm so passionate about it and I hate my job and all of those kind of different things. And then they quit and they give themselves 6 months to go and try and make this business work. Now, they haven't planned or mapped out financially, can they support themselves? Is this business even going to work? Is it going to draw an income? Can it even potentially replace their former income? And, did you do a lot of thought around this before you made those decisions? Like, did you map out how this was going to kind of play out even financially?
No, I didn't. I took a jump and a risk.
Okay.
But that said, as we've talked about, I have two businesses.
Yeah.
One of them was immediately revenue generating from day one.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that was going to be the case.
Yeah.
But there was still more risk around that. So this is a CMO on demand business.
Mm-hmm.
There's still more risk around that than, a full-time permanent role with a large corporate.
Sure.
But I did sort of know, when I was exiting the corporate world and, moving into CMO on demand and Aprelo, that CMO on demand in particular, had a level of, stability in the likely income that I was going to generate from it.
Right.
Aprelo, on the other hand, was, I get a bit more of I really am just doing this for the passion because I love to do it. And, whilst I had a business plan and, a path for how I was going to commercialise it and make money, it was a longer path.
Right.
So there was a greater period of not much revenue coming in. So I guess, it's a juggling act, and that's how I made it work.
You mentioned a couple of key things in there, which is you did have a plan, and so you had already mapped out in your head that one of the two businesses was going to be immediately more the lifeline, if you like, or the support structure behind your livelihood, and the other one would be more of your passion-driven business, and it was going to have a longer time frame to realize more the financial side of it. But you already had known that, which I think is good, because sometimes people get into business, they haven't really got much of a plan, and they don't know necessarily, is it going to make money? How much is it going to make? What are the risks? And I've seen a lot of people, I've worked with quite a few hundred people that have gone down this path simply not putting any thought towards financially, is this even going to be able to sustain me? Or is it more just a passion? I think it's really good that you actually have both sides of those businesses so you can actually talk about both.
Indeed.
Cool. Okay, so now something that I thought was interesting, and just to change tact a little bit, I read in an article by Forbes that was saying there's this big shift now in terms of businesses that are being started by women. Traditionally, when you look at some of the stats, some of the really big ones you look at today, like the Googles and Apple and all of these big companies, traditionally have been started by men. There are a number that are being started by women, and that trend is starting to grow. And particularly when it comes to, small business, the majority today, and it's growing quite rapidly, are actually being grown by women. And I thought that was quite interesting. And you being a woman and, being successful at what you're doing, what are your thoughts on that? Is that something that you encourage other women to go out and pursue their dreams and make the most of their opportunities?
Absolutely. I think that technology is a large driver. I think that we have a lot more flexibility and a lot more options for different working models now. It's not about building a business where you have to spend long hours in the office and you build a team that's all in one place. It's all about, it's a global economy. There's technology that taps into, different resources in different places that you can leverage. And so I guess as a woman, that ability to have flexibility to be able to focus on your business and focus on other aspects that are important, such as family.
Yes.
Because I think fundamentally women are, we're nurturers, we're family oriented. We place importance on your relationships as well as business success. And I think more and more, technologies and work practices are lending themselves to support being able to do both of those things.
Yeah, that's a good point. With technology, that was going to be another question I was going to ask you, but now that you brought it up, technology definitely has got to the point where it's so flexible now to be able to create things and even run things and communicate with people all over the place. For people that are as time poor as some women with families and kids and things like that, now more than ever, I think, there's the opportunity to go out and make a business or do something from home part-time. And I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, I think it's a very different time that we're living in now than even sort of 10 or 15 years ago. And the other thing too, there's the collaborative economy where there's a lot of sharing of resources across multiple businesses and so forth, which is something that hasn't necessarily been a focus and has only been enabled with the technologies that we have today.
Yeah, and it's only been in the last less than 10 years, because I know that when I started off with IBM in the large corporate world, and they were talking about outsourcing in those days, but outsourcing was really only limited to large companies that could afford it. And the technology wasn't quite there for smaller business to really leverage outsourcing and technology to that degree. And I just think the whole world has changed now. Anyone who wants to can get on. I mean, just the fact that we can collaborate like we are now, and we could be on different ends of the earth, but it wouldn't make any difference. We can collaborate and we can share technology and we can share information. I think it opens up the doors for so many people.
Exactly. The fact that you can pretty much access any kind of technology application in the cloud these days means you can be sitting on a beach and running your business.
I like the thoughts of that. I think that's where all our listeners probably want to be.
Yeah, exactly.
I know that. Now, let's fast forward to the present, Gab. So you're running these two businesses and you're passionate about both, and I think that's wonderful. Describe a day in your life today, say compared to back when you were in corporate. You're probably just as incredibly busy at both times, but what's fundamentally changed now since then?
I guess the biggest change for me is that I am in control of my time.
Right.
So I choose when I work and I choose when I don't work. And that is huge change from corporate, because corporate is the mentality of, 9 to 5, which is really sort of, 8 till 8 or...
I was going to say, I don't ever remember working 9 to 5.
But you're expected to be either in the office or working those hours. And I guess with my businesses, the way that both of them are set up, I have more flexibility around that. So if I feel like taking half a morning off and doing something else that I want to do, I do that. And then, I might start work at lunchtime and work right through until later in the night, or I might, do some work on the weekend. But I guess I have more flexibility around my time. I also, both of the businesses, are set up and resourced in a way that, I'm not required to be, working in or on them, all day, every day either. So I have flexibility in that regard.
That's excellent. Well, and it's good to have that flexibility. Like you said, I think the key thing was just having control of your time.
Yeah.
Talking about the corporate lifestyle, do you miss it? Do you think you would ever go back, or have you kind of shut that door?
Well, look, I always say never, but at this point in time, not a chance I would go back.
Okay. Okay, cool. Good to see that you are focused on your path.
Yeah. I guess it comes back to what I was saying before, follow the feeling. If the feeling takes me back there, I will follow it. But at this point in time, that's not where the feeling is taking me. So I'm enjoying what I'm doing.
Awesome. Talk to me about the kind of people that you hang around with these days, because now that you're not in the corporate environment, you would be surrounding yourself with a completely different group of people. Obviously, when you're doing a CMO on-demand business, you're working with business owners and companies and, that sort of thing. But when you're working with Aprelo or when you're doing your own thing in your own time, who are the kind of people that you hang around with that support you, that nurture you and keep you focused on moving forward?
So I have a core group of friends that hasn't really changed since, my corporate life to now. But interestingly, their paths have sort of evolved in a similar way to mine has. Like a number of them have actually, gone on the path of leaving corporate and, doing more entrepreneurial things or following their passions. So, I think that, naturally we've all sort of gravitated to the same direction. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. So it's almost like like-mindedness has kept you guys together and being able to share maybe similar passions, or even if they're different, the fact that you guys are kind of thinking the same, so you're kind of evolving in the same way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, cool. So you're hanging around similar people in your case. I know some people who've left and gone on to do different things since the corporate world have formed new alliances, new groups, new support structures, all of those different things. And I think they're all fantastic. Getting involved in things like training and education. Talk to us a little bit about that, Gab, because, when you work in a big corporate company, you're constantly doing education and training and keeping your skills up to date and all that. But now when you're doing your own business, you've really got to take responsibility for your own upskill. How do you manage that?
So I do a lot of reading. That's probably the main way that I educate myself now. Some of that is just because, I feel inspired to pick up a certain book that I see. And then other times it's, driven by, client projects or, certain work opportunities that sort of might require me to gain skill in an area where I perhaps don't necessarily have as deep an insight as required. And so, I'll read to get up to speed in that regard, or go and seek out subject matter experts and talk to them.
Yep.
To deepen my insights in certain areas.
Fantastic. And this is obviously for both parts of your business, the CMO stuff as well as Aprelo.
Exactly.
I think that's great. Education doesn't stop. I think we keep learning, throughout life. And I think that's good that you're consistently practicing that. What about your active lifestyle outside of work? I remember when we were back at IBM, you used to run a lot. You were very fit and active. Do you still do all of that stuff today? Like, are you still very active? Do you get out there? Do you run? Do you do all of that?
Yeah, absolutely. Exercise is a big part of my daily routine. I try to do something active every single day.
Okay.
Is it running? No.
Okay.
As you know, I'm passionate about running, but as I've got older, my body has decided that running's perhaps not the best thing for it. So
right.
I do more softer exercise activities now. I walk a lot.
Okay.
I do yoga, I do Pilates, I do swimming.
Fantastic.
Yes. So
in terms of having a balanced lifestyle, how important is it for you to maintain being active and keeping in shape and things like that?
Well, for me, being active is really, it's a stress management technique as much as anything. It really keeps me balanced and grounded. It gives me the opportunity to reconnect with myself. And then obviously there's the aspect of it keeps your body youthful and healthy as well, so long as you don't overdo it. And I guess that's a lesson that I've learned in the past as well, that there can be such a thing as too much exercise, which is not good for you.
I've never had that problem, but I know what you mean. Yeah. Oh, cool. Okay. So Gab, now I want to get to the part of the podcast where we have a little bit of fun. We call this section Rapid Response, and basically what I do is ask our guest just a few questions, and whatever comes to your mind, just spit it out as quickly as you can. And this is instinctive, to use. So if I were to ask you, what's your favorite mode of learning? And I think you kind of hinted at this already.
Yeah, reading. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Most influential book or video or CD or even podcast that you would recommend?
That's a really good question. There's many books, videos, podcasts that have influenced me on my life journey, but I guess the one that stands out the most is Louise Hay. About 15 years ago, read You Can Heal Your Life.
Yeah, that's an amazing, amazing book.
Yeah, and that really resonated with me on a number of levels and was a bit of a life changer for me. So that's probably the thing that stands out as being the most influential in my journey.
Awesome. And a favorite role model or hero that you might have, and why?
That's a good question, and I can't really name one favorite role model or hero. So I think, it's more a trait of people that I really admire, which is, it comes back to what I was talking about before, which is, people who have the courage to follow their intuition, to follow their heart,
yep.
and to follow their truth and their own path, and not be influenced by ego and by fear and by what others think. I think it takes a lot of courage to walk that path, and that's what I aspire to do myself. And I really admire others who are able to do that.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Because it's not necessarily the easy path, but it's the true path, and it's inspirational to me.
I love that answer. That's great. Now, this is an easy one. Do you wake up each day fully inspired, full of purpose, knowing what you're all about, and looking to each day to make the most out of it?
Yeah, absolutely.
there is actually for that one, there was only one right answer. The reason I asked that is because I know people who have started their own business and gone into something that they thought they were passionate about, and ended up creating a nightmare of a situation.
Yeah, and just also on that point, if it doesn't feel right, don't keep going on the path because you've chosen it and you feel like you need to stick to it. It's change it.
Change it, exactly. Now, do you have a cause that you are particularly passionate about?
Well, I guess for me, Aprelo is a reflection of the cause that I'm passionate about.
Okay.
And that is about, everybody appreciating, respecting and loving themselves, and also others, and everyone, having the faith in themselves, the trust in themselves to follow their own path. So that's why I've built a whole business around that whole philosophy.
Fantastic.
And I think that, if everyone in the world did this, and I know this sort of sounds, very cliched, but if everyone did sort of, truly appreciate, respect and love themselves, everyone would feel empowered and inspired to be, doing what it is that they're passionate about, and have more of themselves to give in every aspect of their life, which could only help create a better world, if that makes sense.
It does. That's awesome, Gab. So I'd like to fast forward to the future and ask you, where do you see this journey of yours taking you? Have you got a vision for what you'd like to achieve? Have you got some big goals and dreams out there that, you want to make a reality? And can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so, this might sound corny again, but for me, it's all about following the feeling.
Yeah.
I used to be more of a planner. Mm-hmm. I used to have, every year I would write down the goals that I wanted to achieve for that year, for, 5 years, 10 years and so forth, and work through ticking them off. And I guess what I learnt from doing that is that the fulfillment that you get by ticking a goal off your list, yes, you do feel some fulfillment and gratification, but it's not lasting.
Right.
Whereas if you follow your intuition, you follow your heart, the satisfaction that you can get from doing that is, it's enriching and it's deeply fulfilling. So for me, I've moved away from planning and structuring my whole life to just going with where the feeling takes me. So that's what I'm doing.
Well, it's served you well so far, and I have a feeling it'll take you far into the future. So I think that's awesome. You're bringing a whole humanity aspect to your whole marketing approach, and we really appreciate your time, and I thank you for joining us on this podcast.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you.
That's okay. And Gab, for our listeners, do you mind sharing your website? If people wanted to find out a little bit more about what you're doing, about Aprelo, or even with CMO On Demand, where can they look you up?
Sure. So aprelo.com, aprelo.com,
yep.
and cmoondemand.com.au.
Fantastic. Awesome. Well, there you have it, everyone. Thank you, Gab, again for being on this podcast.
Thank you very much for having me, Gab, and thank you, everybody.
If you like this podcast and would like to understand a little bit more about what was just discussed, then you're in luck. Simply head over to breakfreefromcorporate.com and we have a fantastic bonus gift waiting for you to download. All we ask in return is that you leave us a review on iTunes and or Stitcher, whichever you use. And lastly, help us share this podcast around with your friends, your colleagues through Facebook, Twitter, Google+, or LinkedIn. We truly appreciate all your support and we look forward to seeing you on the next episode.
Thank you for listening to this podcast episode of Break Free from Corporate. Once again, to access previous and all future episodes, visit breakfreefromcorporate.com and subscribe today.